Jesus, thank you. I'm a little concerned that they don't have audio if I'm not hearing them.
Once everybody quiets down, you'll. Can you monitor that camera? You can.
Published in 1776. make a class open to as many students who want to come. And so we thought, well, maybe we can get 25 students, 30 students, maybe 50, and then you kept on signing up. So we're at about 150. And I apologize for the cameras and everything, but alumni wanted to sign up, parents wanted to sign up. So I have no idea how many people are watching online, but probably as many, if not many times, the amount of people in the room. But this class is really for the students here, young and old, who want to be with us. Okay. It's a class, it's for credit, so you're going to do a little work. But really, we just want you to come to learn something. So how to facilitate that? Well, the most obvious thing for us to do, everyone is taking this class pass-fail. You have no option. And why are we doing that? Because we just want you to do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of thinking, do a little bit of arguing, and learning and talking with your fellow classmates. Right? So we want you to be here because you want to learn something. And to take all the pressure out of the class, everyone's going to do it pass-fail. Your writing assignments, your written work, is very simple. We're going to have a pre-class Google Doc. And we want you to write about 150 words. You can write more, you can write less, on your take on the readings, your questions about it, anything about it, what you want to talk about. And we're going to, you'll get a link with the Google Doc. You'll see your name on it, and you'll see a box next to your name. And before every class, and I think we said at some time, before 4:30 on the Tuesdays before class, we want at least 150 words, can be more, on your take on the readings. And then we're going to read those between sort of 5 and 7 and see what you have to say. And if you show up for class and if you do those writings, you'll pass the class. Okay? Good enough? Not too hard. Okay? Fair enough? Okay. Now there's a couple extra lectures. So we're going to meet not every Tuesday of the semester, but many Tuesdays of the semester right here. And then we're going to do a lecture in a few weeks, which will go a little bit longer. So usually we'll end at 8. The lecture on the 27th, which is 2 weeks from today, will go a little bit longer. And the lecturer is a very distinguished historian and Notre Dame graduate. He's going to come give a lecture on 1776, and we'll open that up to others as well. We want you to come to that. And then we're going to have a couple other events. We have a very distinguished legal historian coming in March, and the dates are on the syllabus. Now those lectures, he's actually going to come and give 3 lectures, and I'll talk about him a little bit later. Those lectures are not on a usual class time. They're going to be on a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we want you to try to come to those, though we realize you have other classes and other obligations, and so maybe you can make one. But try to come to those because they'll be very interesting. And they'll be on the general theme of the Declaration of Independence, on natural rights. Okay? So you have the syllabus. You have the reader, which is for students only, okay, because we just printed enough for the students. Now there's one other thing. We want you to come to class since you're getting a credit. So we're going to have a QR code, right, that you'll be able to scan.
Starting next week.
And I guess you scan it and we'll know you're here. Is that how it works?
That's how it works.
So that will be ready for next class. So you can pull your phone out to scan the QR code and then put it away. Okay. Anything else? Did I leave out anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. We're going to have Professor Otteson tell a little bit about what he's going to do. Oh, one other thing. We scheduled the class days to correspond to the least busy times of the semester. And that's why the irregular schedule. So we thought, let's get the kids right at the beginning of the semester and then right after spring break. Right? We don't want this class to interfere with your other classes, even though this is as good, if not better, than your other classes. But we don't want we want this class to be easy on you. Okay? So that's why we meet. And then right when the semester starts getting busy, we'll take a break. And then you come back from spring break. We'll meet a few more times, and then we'll be done. Okay, so it shouldn't interfere with your other classes. Okay. You want to talk a little bit about what you're going to do with Adam Smith?
Sure.
Okay.
You ready? All right. Thank you, Professor Munoz. I would like to join him in welcoming everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. 2026 is a rather auspicious year, so it is the semi-quincentennial, not only of the Declaration of Independence, but also of the publication of the Wealth of Nations. We will not be having, it was published on March 9th in 1776. We're not having a class on that day, but we're pretty close, so we'll be there for most of it. My name is James Otteson. I'm a professor of business ethics here in the Mendoza College of Business, colleague of Professor Munoz's. One thing I wanted to say before we begin, in addition to welcoming all of you, as you may know, if you don't, I will tell you, we are live streaming this to the world. So I will say hello to the world, including my mother, who I think is watching. Hi, Mom. How are you? We're going to talk about these two documents. The Declaration of Independence, Professor Munoz is going to talk about that. That is one of his areas of expertise. I'm going to talk about the Wealth of Nations. I have 3 lectures on the Wealth of Nations. It's 1,000 pages long, and we're going to get all of it in just 3 classes, so we'll do our best. But one thing I wanted to let you know before we begin is Professor Munoz and I did not share with each other what we're going to talk about. He's going to talk about, other than the documents, but we didn't share what we're going to say. We didn't tell each other or run it by each other. So we may or may not agree about things, so it could be the case that we might actually disagree about a few things, which is fun. That's part of what's great about being at a university like Notre Dame. We want to have a spirit of open debate, so there may be some things that we disagree about. Of course, I will say that if there are disagreements between Professor Munoz and me, I'm the one who's right, and I'll just let you know right now. So my part of it, what I thought I would do today is just give you a little bit of a foretaste of what we'll do when we get to my section. Then I'm going to turn it back over to Professor Munoz to talk about the reading that you had. So I'm going to talk about Adam Smith. There is years. Adam Smith lived during a time that we now recognize or now call the Scottish Enlightenment. It was quite a time of learning. Almost every field of human inquiry was seeing the leading edges of it going on in the improbable place of Scotland in the 18th century. Scholars today date the Scottish Enlightenment approximately with Smith's years, so 1720s or so to 1790s or so. Many of the luminaries that you will have heard of, people who were at the forefront of things like geology, mathematics, medicine, political economy. Adam Smith was close friends with someone you may have heard of named David Hume, who was one of the great philosophers in the English language. They were close personal friends. I'm going to talk not just about Adam Smith in general, but we're going to talk about his now most famous book, The Wealth of Nations. But I wanted to motivate this a little bit. I'd like to give you a few numbers to think about. So what you're looking at there is population for the last 12,000 years. So what you see for the last 12,000 years is a whole lot of not much, and then there's quite a spike there, isn't there? So you can see from 10,000 before Christ all the way up to 2,000, virtually nothing. A little bit of growth around the time of Jesus, and then something happens. Maybe you've seen graphs like this before. Why am I showing you that? So that's just human population. I give you a few numbers there. In the year 10,000 before Christ, there were approximately 4 million human beings on the planet. We don't know exactly. Estimates go from anywhere between 2.5 to 5 million. 4 million is a conservative estimate. But demographers who study this think that that was about the number of human beings who were on the planet for the previous 100,000 years of our approximately 300,000 years of Homo sapiens being on the planet. So there really wasn't much change at all. That long, low red line goes back quite a ways. It doesn't really change. And then something dramatic happens. So the first thing I'd like you to think about is what? What might that be? So that's human population. Let me show you another graph, which is more relevant to Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. This is wealth. What I'm showing you there is the total amount of wealth created by all human beings on the planet, aggregated, and in constant 2011 international dollars, which adjusts for inflation and deflation over time. So that is in constant dollars. What did we have? Again, a whole lot of nothing, and then, holy cow, something happened. Something happened. Well, what happened? Now, you might already be generating a theory about this, or maybe you have some ideas about this. If you say it's the Industrial Revolution, you might wonder, why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen earlier? Why did it happen so late? So here are some numbers for you to think about. The growth in wealth, again in constant dollars, what do we have? About $247 billion, or $1,100 per person per year around the time of Christ. $1,100 is not much, so that's about $3 per person per day. That's just below, or just right near, what the United Nations today considers to be the level of absolute or extreme poverty. So that's what almost every human being lived in for most of our history. In 2024, what do we have? $173 trillion. So we went from 247 billion to 173 trillion in constant dollars, about a 700-fold increase in wealth. And it didn't go up nicely and continuously. It all of a sudden happened very recently in human life. This is per capita just for the last 200 years. Just for the last 200 years. So the Declaration of Independence was published in 1776. Wealth of Nations was published in 1776. Going back for the last 200 years, what do we see? In 1820, do you remember the number from the year 1? 1,100. So for 1,800 years, the total growth went from $1,100 per person to $1,500 per person. That's $3 a day per person to $4 a day per person. That is a very slow rate of growth. It's not very much at all. And then after 1820, it went to 21,268, a 14-fold increase. Again, something dramatic is happening. So to summarize, something bigly happened. In year 1 of our Lord, 232 million people, $247 billion in wealth, $1,100 per capita. 1820, we went to 1 billion in total people on Earth, 1.62 trillion. That's a 0.1% average annual growth. That's it, 0.1%. And per capita grew at a paltry, measly 0.02%. That's very small. Look what happened from 1820 to 2004. So we octupled our population, the human population, went from 1.62 to 173 trillion. That's 2.4%. Now maybe 2.4% doesn't impress you. It still sounds fairly small, but note that it's 24 times the rate of the previous 1,800 years. Per capita, 21,268, a 1.33%. Again, maybe not an impressive number, but it's some 65 times greater than what happened before. Now what do we have? 34 times as many people over the last 2,000 years, 700 times as much times. That's not percent. That's why I give you the percentages there. It's 700 times as much wealth, 19 times as much per capita or per person. And per capita is just calculated by taking the total amount and dividing by the number of people who are alive at the time. All right, so let's raise some questions. And these are questions that I would like to address once we get to my section of the course and talk about the wealth of nations. So first of all, what happened? Something dramatic happened. Now, is there a physiological difference between humans in 2024 and humans in the year 1? No, that wasn't it. Something else happened. Something changed. Are you working on an idea about what that might be? So something happened. What happened? Why did things increase so dramatically and so recently in human life, in human history? And let me emphasize, when I say recently, if human beings, if Homo sapiens, modern humans, have been on the planet for approximately 300,000 years, which is that seems to be where the consensus is, about 300,000 years, that means that for greater than 99.9% of the time of human beings being on the planet, we were that long, low red line with virtually no change at all. Nothing changed, nothing happened, and then in the last 0.1% of our existence, this happened. If you think of the time we've been on the planet as a clock of 24 hours, this would have been in the last 58 seconds of the 24 hours. So it just happened, almost in the blink of an eye. What? What happened? And now a little bit of a philosophical question just to whet your appetite. Okay, talking about money. Is money the only thing that matters? Are there other things that matter in life? I will not hold you in suspense. What's my answer to that? No, money is not the only thing that matters in life. Certainly not, the only thing that matters in life. But here's something I will try to convince you of when we get to my turn. That what money can do is enable us to pursue the things that do matter in life. Because when we're living on $3 per person per day for everything, food, clothing, shelter, medical care, tickets to the Notre Dame basketball game, tuition at Notre Dame, that doesn't go very far. That is a very close to subsistence existence. You're not thinking about writing the great American novel. You're not thinking about taking a family trip to Disney World. You're not thinking about whatever other things that you might think round out a life of meaning and purpose. You're thinking about, can we eat today? Can my children survive today? So although money is not the most important thing in life, or the only thing that's important in life, it can enable other things by resolving some of the more pressing needs and allowing us to turn our attention to some other things. So let me look ahead to what we're going to do when we get to my section. Something dramatic happened near the end of the 18th century that led to an unprecedented, historically unprecedented material increase in human prosperity. What might that be? Now, I don't want to give you my view now. I'm just going to be silent about it. I'm joking. That's going to give you an idea of what I think. But before I do, I asked you to read, did you all read, the students in the class, did you read that little piece from The Economist? So The Economist magazine, which is a free trade-oriented British newspaper, or British magazine, been publishing for about 150 years. They wrote a little piece to commemorate, it was right at the end of December last year. Next year is going to be the 250th anniversary of the Wealth of Nations, so they wrote a piece talking about how Adam Smith's reputation is undeserved. And if one of my students is Cole Cherian in the room, where are you, Cole? All the way in the back, yes. My student Cole Cherian brought this to my attention. Thank you, Cole. So here's what The Economist had to say. Adam Smith, so he is often called, has been called the father of economics. His book has been praised, even venerated by some. The Economist, which you might otherwise have expected to actually give some praise to that book, says, oh, it's all overstated. And they gave 3 reasons. Here are the 3 reasons. Can you read those reasons? First of all, they said Smith was a flowery, I'm quoting, you can't make this up. He was a flowery writer who employed long winding sentences. Okay, true, but irrelevant. Smith got some things wrong. For example, he relied on something called the labor theory of value, or what we now call the labor theory of value. But The Economist says, without which there could have been no Karl Marx. Okay, we'll come back to that. And then finally, Smith built on the ideas of others. Okay, so when we get to my section, what I'm going to try to do, what I will argue and try to present to you, make the case to you, that Smith in fact deserves that title of father of economics, and that The Wealth of Nations is one of the most consequential books of the second millennium. So I'm going to try to convince you of that and make that case. Those 3 claims have been brought against a number of people. You could say the same thing about Plato. You could say the same thing about Aristotle. You could say the same thing about Newton. Doesn't mean we don't read them or there's no value in them. So I think those are quite weak objections. So my part of the program will be, I'm going to try to convince you that in fact Smith does deserve the praise and that book does deserve the veneration that it gets. Fair enough? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will turn it back over to Professor Munoz. There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. When I saw that chart that skyrockets, I thought it was a comparative salaries between those in arts and letters and those in the business school.
Oh, yes. Oh, Professor Munoz, I should have mentioned, when I mentioned that we hadn't shared our notes with each other, we also didn't share what we were going to wear tonight. So as you can see, we will have to work on that next time, but I am wearing my Adam Smith tie. I don't know if you got that on. Please go ahead.
Wish I could afford that tie. Okay, so it's beginning of the semester. So something you might think about as you come to this class, but your other classes as well, which is, well, why am I in this class? But what does the professor want me to get out of this class? It's an interesting thing to think about, right? And your evidence is the syllabus. So they're trying to teach you something. What are they trying to teach you? What are they trying to do with you? Okay. So what are we trying to do? What do I hope you get out of your time here, or at least my parts of your time here? Say 3 things, and they correspond to the 3 parts, my next 3 classes. First, what did the founders think they were saying in the Declaration of Independence? And we'll start that tonight probably. But we're going to try next week in particular, starting tonight, but next week in particular, what was the founder's self-understanding of the Declaration of Independence. The next class is, and we have to confront this directly, what about slavery? And you can look at this question in two ways. Both are equally interesting. How could Thomas Jefferson, the drafter of the Declaration, how could many of the signers of the Declaration, they owned slaves? What do we make of that? Right? How do we square that circle? Can it be squared? Or you can ask the same question in a different way, which is, how do a bunch of slave owners declare that all men are created equal? How do they come to say that or see that? Right? And we're going to enter into that discussion through the greatest debate in our nation's history about the Declaration of Independence, which is between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas, who both offer interpretations of the Declaration of Independence. Okay. And then the third thing we're going to do is we'll turn to Lincoln during the Civil War. Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. So the Gettysburg Address, the second inaugural, and then Frederick Douglass's, two speeches by Frederick Douglass, which one I want you to read and the other you might find of interest to read. Okay. So some of the greatest commentators on the Declaration in American history. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. What do I want you to be able to do? Well, first try to understand the Declaration as the founders themselves present it. Understand how Americans have argued about the Declaration. Right? Lincoln and Douglas, the highest or most elevated debate in American history. And then see how Lincoln at Gettysburg talks about a new birth of freedom. And that's my way of getting us into thinking about what does the Declaration mean for us today. Okay? So that's what I hope you get out of it. That's not the only things I hope you get out of it, but at least those three things. And that's why I have assigned the readings I have. Now, there's all sorts of other things we might additionally read, and maybe I'll suggest if you want to do more reading, you could do this reading or that reading. Okay, but those are my basic aims. Okay. Now, I asked you to read this famous essay from the New York Times 1619 Project. And how many of you had read it before this class? Many of you? Well, many of you. Okay, one might also ask, why would Professor Munoz start the class this way? Now, you probably know this by now, but if you don't, I mean, this piece of writing, which won the author, I think it's the Pulitzer Prize and all sorts of awards, is one of the most controversial opinion pieces of journalism published in the last 20 years. Extraordinarily controversial. Created a firestorm. People still argue, why would I start a class which is supposed to be about patriotism and unity in this way? Right? Do you know what's going on in Texas right now? Supposedly, I mean, I don't. But in higher education, there's this controversy right now in Texas. I think it's at Texas A&M. I'm not sure where. I might be wrong. But have you read about this? It's Plato. Plato's on the syllabus, and they're removing Plato. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes? No? Anyone know the details? I don't. Well, I was thinking on the drive in here, if this class was audited in Texas, the class might be prohibited, or at least that reading, the way I started off, right? I mean, this is the quintessential DEI reading. So why do I start off the class this way? Do you think about this when you look at your syllabi? Like what the hell is the professor doing here? So, any thoughts? Yeah, and I'll repeat them so people at home can hear. Yeah, and tell me your name too. Jeremy. Okay, Jeremy. What year are you? Okay. Okay, Jeremy's saying, well, maybe you put it up there to knock it down. Maybe Jeremy knows something about my reputation. Okay, could be, but no, actually, I don't think so. There are some things I disagree with and that historians have criticized, and I'll mention that, but that's not the primary reason. Good. Any other thoughts? Anyone? Yeah, yeah. Tell me your name. Cole? Okay, maybe Cole, again, perhaps knowing me, think, hey, Professor Munoz probably appreciates or respects or admires the Declaration, and so let's get some dissenting voices. That would make sense. Maybe there's something to that, but that's not quite it. That was good. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Tell me your name.
My name's Max.
Max, what year are you, Max? Wait, what year are you? Okay, Max is a sophomore, yeah.
Hannah Jones' point, you're trying to argue against American exceptionalism. That 250 years is a big thing about the Declaration, but maybe what it's cracked up.
Okay, maybe the Declaration wasn't what it's been cracked up to be. Okay, which would make this class deeply ironic, but still interesting, yeah. Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah, Eddie.
My name's Eddie.
Yeah.
Graduate student. Well, Nicole Hannah Jones went to Notre Dame, so maybe this is something that really hits close to home for us.
Okay, the author, Nicole Hannah Jones, went to Notre Dame, that's true. Okay. Yeah, so maybe it hits home to us, okay, in some way. Yeah, there is a Notre Dame connection, that was part of it. Yeah, yeah. Andrea? Okay, Andrea said the Declaration is a living document. And what's the second part you said? Okay, it's a testament to how it works out today and across time. Okay, anyone else want to get in on this? There's something to that. Yeah. David, sophomore, okay. Okay, David says that the Declaration might mean different things to different people and be interpreted differently. And yeah, that starts to get at it. Have any of you read, do you read Plato? Are you allowed to read Plato in the business school? Yeah, we're here in the business school, right? How does Plato proceed? What's his method? Anyone take a guess at that? You have these dialogues, Plato's arguing with people. Yeah. The Socratic method. What is that? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, questions. Who does he question? Well, the people he questions, his interlocutors, right? But what does he examine? What does he get out of these people he questions? Like the first book of the Republic. Have you read this? Right? What's the famous argument in the first book of the Republic? Anyone? There's this guy, Thrasymachus, right? Thrasymachus, some people say. Yeah.
Yeah, little sophomore. Who defines justice as Jesus as the correct use in Congress, or whatever the ruling regime defines as justice in Socrates kind of questions him to the point where he comes to his own definition.
Yeah, okay, the famous first book of the Republic, this fellow Thrasymachus, he's a sophist. He earns his living by standing on a stage and teaching people things, supposedly. Somewhat dubious profession, right? And he teaches for pay, right? It's kind of like what they do in the business school. Yeah.
You're not working for free either, Professor Munoz.
I will say, it's true. Now, I wanted, this is a digression, I'm sorry for doing this. I made a strategic mistake in preparing this class. I went to my dean's office, not my dean personally, and said, hey, we want to teach this class, what's the rate of pay if we teach this class? I mean, we're going to do it, but where does the money come from? Do I have to make a special requisition or whatever? Foolishly, which is why I'm in arts and letters and not in the business school, I should have gone to the business school dean. Because you know what the dean's response was? Oh, we're not going to pay you any extra for that. So We're not doing this for pay, as a matter of fact. Right? Okay, so the first book of the Republic, in fact, every Platonic dialogue, what you see is Socrates engages these people and he examines their opinions. Right? And so in this first book of the Republic, he takes on Thrasymachus' opinion about justice. And Thrasymachus' opinion is there is no justice. The strong impose what's in their interest on everyone else, and they call it justice. So there is no justice. There's only power. And Socrates goes through that argument. And what's really interesting is, if you read the dialogue, he has these young people, Glaucon and Adimantus, who are Socrates' companions, and they're watching this dialogue. And these are young, ambitious guys. They're like Notre Dame students. In a way, Thrasymachus' teaching is extraordinarily attractive to them. Right? Thrasymachus is saying, well, if you really look under the hood, there's no morality and you can do anything. And Socrates has to, now do you get the drama here? Socrates, the teacher, has to convince these two young men, extraordinarily talented and ambitious young men, don't follow Thrasymachus. And how can he do that? He has to defeat him in argument, enticing the young folks, his young companions, to stay with him. And then if you've read the Republic, you know it goes on and on and on, right? There's another 9 books. In fact, you finish it, you're still not sure what justice means. Right? So Socrates begins with opinions. And this essay in the 1619 project is so interesting. It's so well executed. Right? And this is the real reason I give it to you. It's such a thoughtful essay. And it articulates 2 opinions about the Declaration of Independence. And if you go back and read it with fresh eyes, and whatever you think of the author, just leave that aside. Just read the essay. The author starts with a depiction of her father. Do you remember this? And what's her opinion, or what's her thoughts about the father that she emphasizes in this essay? What does she say about him? Who is he? How would you describe him? Anyone? Yeah. So we should say what everyone I think knows. All right, she's black, right? She's a black American, right? And her father is a black American, and he served in the army. And what does he do? He's patriotic. How do we know he's patriotic? He keeps a flag up in the yard. And she writes in a way, she's a great storyteller. And how does she draw attention to how important this flag is? Did you pick up these details? She really, yeah.
Yeah, because the paint is being chipped on the house, and then wants to make sure to have a fresh flag up instead of getting tattered.
Yeah, did you notice that? She draws this, what's the image or idea you have of her father? Right? He loves America, right? Has America been good to him? No. What do we know about him in his life? He encountered racism in the army. Grew up in a time of segregation. The country was unjust, at least in the small portrayal, unjust to him. But he loves America. Okay. Anyone want to add anything to that? Did you notice this? Okay. What's her opinion about the Declaration of Independence? Or let me retract that. What's her opinion in the context of this story about the Declaration? What's her opinion of her father? She doesn't understand this patriotism. Why is her father like this? Right? And let me read you this quote here. So when I was young, she writes, "When I was young, that flag outside of our home never made sense to me. How could this black man," that's her father, "how could this black man, having seen firsthand the way his country abused black Americans, how it refused to treat us as full citizens, proudly fly its banner? I didn't understand his patriotism. It deeply embarrassed me." She continues, "I had been taught in school through cultural osmosis that the flag wasn't really ours." She's speaking of black Americans. "That the flag wasn't really ours. That our history as a people began with enslavement, and that we had contributed little to this great nation. It seemed that the closest thing to it seemed that the closest thing black Americans could have to cultural pride was to be found in our vague connection to Africa, a place we had never been. That my dad felt so much honor in being an American felt like a marker of his degradation, his acceptance of our submission." I mean, just pause here, whatever you think of her. I mean, she's a beautiful writer, right? And these images of this patriotic, older black man who flies the flag proudly, indeed takes better care of his flag than his own home. And you wonder there, like, okay, no. And then his daughter, a product of elite education, the New York Times, what's her attitude towards her father? How would you describe it? Anyone? Yeah. Bewildered. Okay. What else? She's embarrassed. What? It'd be like her parents came to class and they spoke. Right? How many of you would like that? Like, Dad, you don't know. You're being a fool, right? Isn't that what she conveys? It's like you believe in justice, or the justice of the Declaration, a justice that's not there. Isn't that what she's saying? So it brings up the question. This piece, one of the most influential pieces of journalism, right, in the last, I don't know, certainly the last generation, right, of your lifetime. This arguably is, perhaps the most influential New York Times essay. So we might take up as one of our questions, what's the more accurate understanding of the Declaration of Independence? The portrayal, her father or Nicole Hannah-Jones? It's an interesting question, right? Yeah, please. It's an ideal and a lie. I think, and what she's trying to do is to try to reconcile the two, right? So that's her starting point, one starting point, right? And I think maybe you could say this is her starting vantage point is the vantage point of elite American opinion, I think, is captured by her, right? Now, it is interesting. In a way, she's trying to find a way to save, black Americans in a way, save the Declaration. So I think it would be wrong to see her as anti-American. In fact, she says black Americans are the true Americans, which is a very interesting argument. Okay, but our main task is not to understand her position, but to understand the Declaration. Okay, we have 15 minutes, good. Now this is gonna be hard in this room, being televised, but I'm kind of curious to know, what if anything were you taught about the Declaration, say in high school? Not whether you agree or disagree with it, just what were you taught? I'm curious to know how. So if anyone is looking for an interesting undergraduate thesis, I have a suggestion. And it's perfect since it's 2026. See if you can find old high school textbooks and see how the Declaration is portrayed. Like, can you find a textbook, from the 1910 and 1920 and 1930, and so on, every 10 years or whatever, different time periods, and in different regions of the country. And just look at the pages on the Declaration of Independence. Is the same thing taught or different things taught? Or some things taught in one place, in different places? I have no idea. I've never done this. It'd just be very interesting. I mean, maybe you do it and it's not interesting. But I suspect you'll find different things. But what if anything, were you taught? Yeah. That the Declaration, they might have said all men are created equal, but they didn't really believe that, or they didn't understand it to be all, didn't include all. It didn't include women, it didn't include minorities, something like that. Tell me your name. Lexi, okay. Is that, how many of you were something like that? Okay, not too many hands, but some hands. Maybe, I don't know, 20 to 30% of the room. 20 or 30% of the room. What, anyone else? What were you taught? Yeah, tell me your name. Ray. Ray? Okay. Okay, Ray says, we were taught it was a document advocating for a revolution in a new system of government. So basically, you're taught some facts about it. How many of you got got a lot of facts about the Declaration? Okay, a lot more hands. I think that's usually how it's taught today. And why would people just teach the facts about the Declaration? Yeah, right. You don't want to, the last thing you want to do if you're a teacher is have some student go to the principal and say, right? Most professors, most teachers don't want to court controversy. But I'm tenured, so, I get it. Okay. I think that's often how it's portrayed. Okay, here's the method I propose to try to figure out how we should think about the Declaration. I suggest we start off just by reading it and see what they say and try to understand it on its own terms. Right? See if we can understand the argument. Right? And then after we can understand the argument, then we can address really the deeply difficult question about what does all men created equal? Does it include all men? What about slavery? Right? So let's take it on its own terms, and then we'll dive into the deeper, more troubling questions. Okay? That's what I propose we do. So go back and reread the Declaration again. Okay? Now I have 12 minutes. We don't have a lot of time, so I want to use all my time. What's the purpose of the Declaration? Kind of like I said, okay, we should look at the syllabus and try to figure out what's the purpose of this class, according to your professor. Like, why are they making you do this? Why'd they write this thing? Tell me your name again. Colby. Okay, to complain. Okay. To detail their grievances, Colby says. Well, they certainly do that. That's the part of the Declaration no one ever reads, right? It's interesting what's in there, right? King seems like a bad guy, okay? Yeah. Okay, to outline a set of values or principles by which to build a new nation. Okay, that's true, I think. Yeah, as is what Colby said. What else? But if you could, why are they doing it? They actually say why they're doing it. Yeah. Well, who hasn't spoken yet? This is a big class. We got to get as many people. Anyone? Yeah. Yeah. Did you say a 41st year senior? Yeah. That's good. Okay, so to establish a new nation, which required us to break from the British Crown. Okay. I expected someone to say to declare independence. Yeah, yeah, which is true. So the last paragraph, you can pull out your reader. Let's see. If we read the last paragraph, I don't think we read this part at the football games. You know, my other way to explain this class was so at the beginning of the football games, you actually know what those ideas mean. Someone want to read? I better read since I have the microphone. Last paragraph. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare, so this is the purpose, to declare, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, etc., etc. Are and of right ought to be free. What is this of right? What do they mean by that? I mean, it's not like they're, you know, like leaving home and just saying, I'm out of here, I'm free, because I want to be. What does the of right add to it? Yeah, it's injustice, right? Like we deserve to be free. It's just we are separating, renouncing our allegiance. They're making an argument about justice. We've been treated badly, therefore we have a right to leave and start a new nation. Well, what's the argument? That's why they talk about writing to the decent opinions of mankind. It's interesting. It's not just a declaration of independence. It's an argument about political justice. In universal terms. Abraham Lincoln will say later, we'll get to it, he says, all hail to Jefferson, right? In the middle, I'm paraphrasing here, in the middle of like a revolutionary war, he introduces principles of justice, right? About why the Americans of right were justified in breaking from their allegiance. Okay, the Declaration is, it's not a legal argument, but it's in the shape of a legal argument. And there's two key syllogisms, okay? Let me just give these to you. I should have printed them so you have a handout, but you can write them down. They're pretty simple. And if we had more time, we'd go through the text. Okay, the argument in two simple syllogisms. The first major premise. Point A, governments are instituted to protect rights. Okay, governments are instituted to protect rights. Point B, the King of England has failed to protect the rights of Americans. Actually, I should be more precise in A. Governments are instituted to protect natural rights. Point B is the King of England has failed to protect the natural rights of the Americans. That's what all the grievances document point B, right? Point C, the government by the King of England over the Americans fails the purposes of government. Okay, that's the first syllogistic argument. Second syllogistic argument. When government fails to act according to its purposes, it is the right of the people to alter and abolish it. When a government fails to act according to its purposes, it is the right of the people to alter and abolish it. That's the right of revolution. Okay, point B, or I guess we're on D, E, and F here, so point E. Americans are a people who live under a government that has failed to secure the ends of government. So F, the conclusion, Americans have the right to abolish the king's government over them. You see the structure of the argument? Therefore, given the premises, we have a right to be free. Everyone see that? Just everyone got it down? Okay, what are the key points? The key points are the premises, right? What are the two premises? Governments are instituted to protect rights. Where does that come? Why? Is that true? And the second one is there's the right of revolution. You can overturn the government, throw it off, if it doesn't secure your rights. So why should governments be instituted to protect rights? I mean, what else could a government be instituted to do? I mean, I was listening to NPR today. Might surprise some of you, but I do. Right? Listening to NPR today, and they had talking about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was speaking about the economy. And what do you think Donald Trump said about now his approval ratings are very low about the economy. What do you think he said about the economy? It's the greatest economy we've ever had, right? And the purpose of government, economists would tell us, some economists would tell us, is what? To make us rich, right? Sorry, am I confusing government with Mendoza, or, right? Sorry. I should bite the hand that feeds me, right? Right. So some people would say the purpose of government is to make us rich, isn't it? What else might a government do? Yeah. Okay, to keep people safe, that gets to protecting rights. What about to make us good? To make us virtuous? Why is that not the purpose of government? Aristotle says in the Politics, right, that's the other class I'm teaching, the purpose of government is to make citizens doers of noble deeds. Doers of noble deeds. To make you excellent. Protecting rights seems a lot lower than making you excellent, right? Or what about getting you to heaven? Isn't that the highest end? Right? I mean, that's the answer you're supposed to give, right? Like, what is the purpose of life and everything? Is to get to heaven. It's not to get rich or to be safe or even to do noble deeds. It's to give it. Why isn't that the purpose of government? I mean, what do the Gospels say the purpose of government is? Anyone? Come on, you got to take 2 theology classes, right? Yeah. Yeah, render under Caesar what is Caesar's, render under God what is God's. Well, what's Caesar's? It's interesting, right? To follow the Gospels, you have to know what belongs to Caesar's. What do we know from that statement? Render under Caesar's what belongs to Caesar, render under God's what to God. And what can we derive from that? Yeah, so you're supposed to pay your taxes. Okay? So what does that mean about legitimacy of government? It's legitimate for a government to collect taxes, right? Which, if it's legitimate for government to collect taxes, that presupposes, I think, that it's legitimate for government to exist. Jesus isn't an anarchist, right? It's a fair construction, right? But also you're supposed to render under God's what is God's. What does that imply? What is God's Caesar's? Yes, no? You following me? I mean, he's saying, render under God. This stuff belongs to God, and this stuff belongs to Caesar. And taxes are over here, right? With me? So does the stuff about God belong to Caesar? How did Caesar understand his power? Where did Caesar understand or claim his power to come from? Anyone know? From the divine. So what's Jesus saying about Caesar's own self-understanding of his power? The Caesars who say, my power comes from God, you should treat me like a god, what's Jesus saying to that understanding? That's wrong, right? Caesar's own self-understanding and presentation is erroneous. Saying that is the type of thing that gets you killed. It undermines political authority, at least the political authority that claims divine right. Everyone following me here? So, okay, I'm out of time, so let me just conclude here. It's not clear what belongs to Caesar, other than some taxes in existence from the Gospels, right? And the founders are going to make an argument. The legitimate purposes of government are to protect your natural rights. And the articulation of rights is in the Declaration of Independence. So that whole understanding of our country, on which our country is based, a country that is contributed in part to the generation of all that wealth in those charts, is based on the idea that government is to protect rights. And what we're going to do in next class is try to understand why the founders said that.